Good morning, everyone. A very good morning. Shall we begin the session? Yeah, today's session is late due to that ID has expired. Yeah, email ID. Yes, yes. Let's start with the session. There is a hosted code to the session. So whatever the add-in, whatever the code that is used behind the pattern are known as the hosted code. Now let's see next part, that is the discovery of hosted code. So whenever we are using the code, so whenever the code is running in the Office application process, so the Office application must be able to discover your code, load the process into the process space, and run into your code. So first of all, there is a code that must be able to discover, that must be able to load, that must be able to run your code. So there are three parts of this: discover, load, and then run. That means execute, yes. And the Office admin are also registered in the Windows registry so that the Office can start, find and start them. Under this registry, that also seems a little non.NET, but this is necessary because Office 2003 talks to add-ins as they were enable or as they were COM objects through COM intro. So whatever the COM objects, whatever their area that is used with the COM object, that is used with the Office add-in, that talks about the add-ins. And the main motto, main code behind the document pattern does not require a registry entry. Instead, this code is associated with the document by adding some special properties, whatever the properties they have, so the document file. And Office also reads these properties when the document opens. And then Office loads the code associated with the document, whatever the document that they have. Same process, loads, opens, and then runs the code. Now, what is the context? What is the text that is provided to the hosted code? It is very critical. That depends on the application to application, we can say. It is critical that your hosted code, that context, it needs to get the application object or the document object for the Office application into which it is loading up. And the COM add-ins are also provided with the context to which an interface implemented by the add-in class that is implemented with the VSTO that are provided with the context to a class created in the project that represents the application being customized. Whatever the application that they have, so that represents the application that been customized, that has been provided with the VSTO. And the code behind the document in VSTO is also provided with the context to a class creation in the project that represents the document being customized. The next is entry point for the hosted code. So at the startup level, Office calls into the entry point where your code can run for the first time and also register for the event that might occur later in this session. And for a COM add-ins, this entry point is in the on connection method of the IDTE extensibility interface implementation by the COM add-ins. And for a VSTO, Outlook add-in and the VSTO code behind the document, this entry point is the startup event handler. So whatever the startup event handler that is taken out, that is represented by the IDTE extensibility. Now, this is the entry point. Now, next is how the code gets run after startup. So how they are executed or how the code gets run, or we can say the execute. So after hosted code starts up, so code continues to run in one of the following ways. Now, what are the various ways? First is code runs in response to the event raised by Office. So whatever the code, whatever the response that they have, so that must be raised by Office. And the most common probability or the most common way that how the code runs after startup is in response to the events that occurs in the Office application. So whatever the Office application key in, whatever the add-in that they require, so they must use the startup is in response to the event. For example, Office raises events when a document opens or a cell in a spreadsheet change. And this outcome also shows a simple class that listens to the activate event that Excel worksheets object raises. And this typically will look up or will hook up event listener such as the one that in which the initial entry point of your code is called. So whenever there is an entry point that is called, that looks up with the most common startup event that must look up to the Office application. Then interface methods known as or called as and called on the objects provided to the Office. So whatever the Office application, whatever the startup class for a COM add-in implement, that interface will be provided by the IDTE, that is Integrated Development Technology Extensibility. Two, that has a method that Office calls during the run of the Office application. And for example, if the user turned off the COM add-ins, for example, this is one of the example, then that's the responsibility of the Office to call the on disconnection method on the IDTE extensibility to interface. Why? Because one product is also used for the managing the on connection, one is used for the on disconnection. In this way, additional codes run after the initial entry point has run. So whenever there is an initial entry point that runs, that code must be provided, that code must be given to the Office. Last is event raised on code behind the classes. Next part is what is the entry point for the hosted code. So at the startup level, Office calls into the entry point where your code runs and also behaves for the first time and also register for the event that might occur later in this session. And for a COM add-ins, this entry point is the on connection method of the IDTE extensibility to interface implementation. So whatever we implement, whatever we use, so that is provided by the VSTO Outlook, VSTO code, and that is used behind the document, and this entry point is known as the startup event handlers. Now, how the code gets run after startup. So one is the entry point that is run, exit point we have done. Now how the code will run or how the code gets run after each and every startup. So whenever we are using the, or whenever we have started the course, so the code continues to run in one of the more following ways. First is code runs in response to the event raised by the Office. Say the most common form that the code runs after startup in response to the event that occurs in the Office application only. So whenever we use this line, so that first line is very important because this is the most common form of implementation that is carried out. Whenever we are using the response, whenever we are using the startup that is in response to the event that occurs with an online application or the Office application. For example, when the Office raises event, when a document opens a cell in a spreadsheet changes, that shows a simple class that listen to the activate event that Excel worksheet will provide, will raise, or typically we will hook up event listeners where the initial or when the initial entry point of your code is called. So whenever there is an initial entry point that the code is called, that is provided with the interface method, that is provided with the object that is provided to the Office. So objects such as the startup class for a COM add an implementation known as the IDTE extensibility tools. Now this keyword is also used that have a method that have a we can say the setup during the runtime of the Office application. So whenever we are using the Office application, that must be used, that must be points with the keywords that have a user or that is used with the user turn off the COM add-ins. Office calls the on disconnection method on the IDT extensibility interface implemented by the COM add-ins. So in this way, additional code runs after the initial point or entry point has run. So whenever we are using the initial entry point, that must be implemented, that must be used after the initial point has run. Then event raised on the code behind the classes. So whatever the event that is raised, whatever the classes that we have, so that whatever the class we have in the VSTO project that represent the customized application or the documents that are handled, that are startup and the shutdown events. And after the constructor of the class executes, Office raises the startup event. And when the document is about to be closed, Office raises the shutdown event. So one is the startup event, one is the shutdown event that is provided with the customized application. That is used with the customized application, we can say. Now next is how the code gets unloaded. So till now we have discussed how to load. Now next is how to unload the document, how to unload the code. So your code gets unloaded in a number of ways depending on the development pattern that they are using. For example, if it is a SDLC, that is a system development life cycle, so there is a different criteria for choosing a, if there is a different concept, or data management, that is a different concept that is chosen. That depends on the benefit to benefit, that depends on the code to code. So in the hosted pattern of running code, there is some method that is code or event that is staged notifying you that you are about to be unloaded. And for a Chrome add-ins, Office also calls the on-disk connection method. And for BSTO code behind the documents and the Outlook add-in, Office uses the shutdown event before your code is unloaded. Then Office Automation Executable. This section also considers each of the three patterns of the Office solutions in more detail, that have an automation executable pattern, that have an Office pattern in a straight way, by creating a new instance, by creating an object with the Office application. And because this automation also controls the Office application, so automation executable code runs at a startup and any time thereafter while executing or when executing, control returns to the automation executable. And whenever there is an automation executable uses new to create an application object, this automation executable controls the lifetime of the application by holding the created application object in a variable. And the Office application also determines whether it can shut down by determining the reference count or the number of clients that we are using in an application object. Yeah, that is determined by referencing the count function also the number of clients that we are using in the application object. So whatever the object that they use, it can shut down by determining the reference count or the number of clients that we are using. We can say, but not hard and fast rule that it will be carried out with the number of ways how it will be delivered. So that depends on the requirement to requirement, that depends on the person to person who is using that. So who is using the application object. So now it is time to hold it, holding a reference to the Excel application object. And when the my Excel app variable goes out of the scope, so the .NET garbage collection releases the object and the Excel is notified with a console application object that is no longer needs or no longer required with the Excel application object. This causes the Excel count of clients holding a reference to the Excel application object to go to 0 and the Excel also exits because no clients are using any Excel anymore. Why? Because no Excel is required, no output is required, no client is required. And when you create an Office application by creating a new instance, the application starts up without showing its window. That proves very useful because you can